Your work phone rings, and you're already filled with dread. The only time Hollywood calls you is when they have a monumental problem with the script they want you to fix with a few lines of dialogue and a one-liner. Hey, you're a millennial who's hip with the times, right? You're a nerd and stuff, right? Then you're gonna love this project. And here it comes. The 3 worst words a script doctor can hear. Video, game, movie. Okay, so we're script doctors. We don't get the luxury of throwing out the premise, changing entire characters, adding reams of new dialogue. We're lucky if we get to edit out the endless fart jokes. To very quickly sum up the script, it's a Wizard of Oz, Alice in Wonderland style story of a modern day soldier being thrown into the world of Monster Hunter. These kinds of stories are useful for a few reasons. 1. The hero has a very clear desire, return home. 2. The hero can act as a stand-in for the audience. Things that are new and unfamiliar for the audience will be the same for the hero. I'm not going to comment on whether this was a good idea for a movie based on Monster Hunter. I mean, it's not, but that's obvious. Anyway, Miss Generic Soldier and a disposable posse spend 10 minutes trading empty banter in what is presumably an attempt to give them character. How do seasoned writers keep making this mistake? It's as rudimentary as it comes. All we learn about these characters is how they talk, what they look like. We've got the funny ones, the serious ones. Oh, that's actually about it. Being smart, dumb, witty, male, female, black, white, Asian, nerdy, it's all characterization. It's not the same thing as showing character. We know nothing about any of these characters. Mistaking character for characterization is one of the most fatal mistakes you can make. Character is revealed in the choices we make under pressure. So, in order to learn anything about these characters, we need to see them react to situations that force them to make choices. The heroine and her posse face the inciting incident, a huge storm that, unbeknownst to the heroine, is a portal to the world of Monster Hunter. They find themselves accosted by a Diablos, essentially an ornery, sand-dwelling horned dinosaur. The MacGuffin is established, an RPG that gets thrown aside during the ruckus. A few of her posse are killed, they escape to relative safety hiding in a cave, and we get some dialogue where the heroine snaps a soldier out of her hysteria. Except, it doesn't make any sense. The heroine wants to go back out there and fight the Diablos. Why? The only reason given, and it really seems like the script wants this to make sense, is that they're soldiers, and that's what soldiers do. Now, I'm no soldier, but wouldn't the first priority be to avoid fighting the giant monster they just escaped from, getting their bearings and, I don't know, trying to find a way home? Why would fighting the Diablos even be a priority? It doesn't matter, because they're immediately attacked by giant spiders. Her entire posse is killed off, and the heroine wakes up in an egg thing. The movie turns into the spider cave scene with Shelob in Lord of the Rings. After escaping Shelob, the heroine just kind of wanders for a bit. The Sauron Tower kind of seems to be her destination, for no explicit reason. At least the script tries to make it clear that fighting the Diablos is the only way forward. She's stuck on a rock island, surrounded by a big, angry, metaphorical shark. Her wandering for food and water leads her into conflict with the other hero, a denizen of this world, Mr. Monster Hunter. He holds her prisoner, she gets free, she holds him prisoner, and that's where we get our first real character revelation in the script. It's at the 40-minute mark, but better late than never. She hasn't had anything to drink for a whole day now, and she's about to drink from his water supply when he kicks it over, denying them both water. In retaliation, she smashes a religious icon he's been praying to. This leads to the first actual action in the script so far. Wait, you might say. What about all that stuff with the Diablos? And then all that stuff with the spiders? And then all that stuff with Mr. Monster Hunter before this? There's been a lot of fighting, running, exploding, skewering. It's almost exhausting how much you're lambasted by it all. But that's not action. It's simple kinesis, mindless movement without meaning. Action needs to have weight for consequences to exist that the audience believes in. We don't actually think that the heroine is going to die at any point in the earlier scenes. But in this scene, the violence is stemming from the unique flaws our heroes have, a sense of spitefulness. All the action in the previous scenes was unavoidable. It was simply the most logical outcome in those situations. In a word, this action tells us something about our heroine. It isn't simply about getting free. She isn't just acting like a soldier, which has been the extent of her character thus far. She's trying to inflict pain on Mr. Monster Hunter purely because she hates him. There's a few minutes of actually pretty brutal fighting until Mr. Monster Hunter ends up down a spider hole into Shelob territory, leaving the heroine with a choice. Let him get eaten or pull him up. This is the strongest scene in the script. A lot of random things happen in the script. Most of these random happenstances feel contrived, but not this one. Here, the story world conspires against the heroine to force her into a situation where she must make a choice under pressure. Sound familiar? Ding ding. That's how you reveal character. Even though the likelihood of the fight ending with him dangling, being attacked by the same spider she was nearly eaten by, is infinitesimal, it doesn't feel contrived. Why? Because there's purpose behind the randomness. The story world is confronting the heroine, making her reveal what type of person she truly is. So, she pulls them up, they make peace with some chocolate, and we get the Tarzan Lost in Translation buddy plotline for the next act, as they band together to get the rocket launcher from Act 1 and take down the Diablos. We get a training montage as the heroine gets suited up in gear. They overcome the language barrier and work together as a well-oiled machine to take the baddie down. Mission accomplished. And then, we kind of just get a big traveling montage as the script tries its best to get us to the Sauron Tower. The script really falls apart here as it struggles to make anything make sense. One Perlman in a wig shows up, turns out he speaks English, explains that the tower is, conveniently enough, the portal that will take the heroine home. They just need her help killing a bigger, badder monster. Can I just interject and say there's so much useless exposition here. After getting through the entire movie without much exposition, thanks to the whole we don't speak each other's languages thing, it crams in so much monologuing about ancient civilizations, why and how the two worlds came to meet, why Rathalos is guarding the tower. I mean, geez, there is absolutely no economy of exposition here. So, Mr. Monster Hunter, one Perlman in a wig, and the heroine go out to kill the Rathalos. It's apparently impervious to weapons, except for the fraction of a second before it belches fire. I mean, that's not how I remember Rathalos fights being, but let's just keep our changes as minimal as possible. So, Rathalos kills a bunch of mooks. The hero gets shunted back to our world. She gets picked up by the military. The Rathalos follows her through the portal and wipes them all out. Heroine remembers the Rathalos' fatal weakness and brings it down, but gasp, it's not dead. She's rescued at the last minute by Mr. Monster Hunter and Ron Perlman. They do a sequel bait shot of them rushing a Gormakala. And then, roll credits. If that sounded like a garbled mess, well, that's because it is. Okay, look, let's not beat around the bush. The script is in dire straits. The guy that made the movie, Paul Anderson, he makes all the trashy video game movies. That's his thing. Well, him and Uwe Boll. Look, I'll let the man speak for himself. These are actual quotes from interviews with him. I've always positioned myself as a populist filmmaker. People see my films and they cheer and they clap. I do passionately care, but I care in a way where I go to the cinema and I see their reactions. That, to me, is my validation as a filmmaker. The ultimate arbiter of whether a film is good or bad is when you sit with 350 people who've paid their money to see your movie. Do you entertain them? Do you make them cheer? Do they applaud at the end? That's always been my approach. I'm not gonna say this guy has got some issues with validation, but if the sole reason you make films is to watch a bunch of people clap, then you've got issues with validation. An audience for a blockbuster film will clap and cheer at anything that placates their desire for exploding and violence. If that was truly Anderson's whole opinion, he could have just made 2 hours of CGI violence over and over again for his entire career. Phone it in. No, Anderson strives to make good films. I just don't think he's very good at it. He's the epitome of the writer who has a handful of cool scenes in his head, writes them in lascivious detail, and then tries to stitch them together with some window dressing. The schoolboy who doodles fight scenes in the margins of his textbooks. Fights are cool, violence is fun. I'm not taking away from that. But you'll never move another human being without making it all mean something. Unfortunately, you won't have a job as a script doctor for long unless you're willing to work with what you're given. So, let's start with the most terminal problem, the hero. Your story begins and dies with them. Something is keeping them from their object of desire. They struggle to get what they want, but are constantly beset by opposing forces. Their unique reaction to these forces is their character. So in this case, the object of desire is simple, to return home. But it's not enough to have a desire. Our heroine needs to have a weakness, a critical flaw that gets in the way of what she wants. What's the point of this? Well, by giving your hero a flaw, you give them a place to grow from. You give them a mark of immaturity that keeps them from being the best person they can be. What the best person they can be means to you is your own unique view of the world. Without this element, your hero can't grow, and growth is the central beating heart of story. What's our hero's weakness? Well, Up until the fight with Mr. Monster Hunter, she has no character outside of the soldier. Again, remember that characterization isn't the same thing as character. Well, in that scene, we get a sense of her spitefulness when she destroys the religious figurines Mr. Monster Hunter was praying to. Alright, we need to expand this weakness and extrapolate it to the rest of the script. If we're not allowed to make grandiose changes to the script, then this is what we've got to work with. Look, there are infinite ways to create an arc for a character. This is just one that would take the least amount of editing to get to, going from asshole boss to realizing the power of friendship. How does this improve the script? Let's rewind back to the beginning. Instead of the generic, we're soldiers in the desert banter, we have her being a sadist who her subordinates obviously despise. Throw in a scene where she makes an example of one of them just to exercise her power, and we're golden. Now, when the storm comes, let's give the team a chance to leave, to drive away and report back to base. Her team are wary of traps, but she, being the glory hound boss, drives them straight into it, refusing to back down from their mission. Now it's her fault when they end up having their equipment torn to shreds, stranded in a new world. Her own unwillingness to listen to her team gets them into the situation. Her own weakness propels the narrative forward, as her reaction to the inciting incident puts them into the world of Monster Hunter. Now, things can pretty much progress as they did before. The Diablos showing up, the RPG MacGuffin, and so on. But the difference is, the soldiers are now dying for a reason. They're dying to show the heroine the consequences of her weakness. They now force her to see that her bad call got them all killed. And now, when she gives a nonsensical speech about being soldiers and fighting the Diablos because that's what soldiers do, it feels in character. She's trying to rouse the troops and doing a horrible job at it just in time to see them all killed. This one small change can have a huge effect on the rest of the script. There's a risk of alienating the audience due to the heroine being too unlikable, sure, but since the following scenes are just her, alone, fighting giant spiders, experiencing horrors, and generally having a bad time, we're going to root for her anyway. When someone is getting thematically punished, it's hard to find them too unlikable for long. Now, the meeting with Mr. Monster Hunter and the whole arc up to killing the Diablos doesn't need to change. It all fits into her new overall arc. Her breaking his religious icon, the scuffle, the training montage, with the added weight that when she saves Mr. Monster Hunter from the spiders, it feels like she's growing as a person, taking her first baby steps into caring for another person. That leads up to the journey to Sauron's tower. Look, the whole Lost in Translation bit is fun and all, but the fact is, some exposition is needed, and it's needed way earlier than when Ron Perlman in a week shows up. There's just honestly no reason for the heroine to follow Mr. Monster Hunter at this point. She kind of just tags along because the script says so. We can solve this problem whilst letting our heroine grow just that bit more by this next change. It might seem like this change exists so there can be more exposition in the script, but it's actually the opposite. The last half hour is filled with so much unnecessary exposition. Exposition gives the audience context. Context is key to give focus to what the hero wants, what they fear. It gives us stakes. Needless exposition is poison. We as writers need to treat exposition like gunpowder, a useful tool that's destructive when used incorrectly. Exposition is ammunition. Make every shot count. Great exposition is threaded seamlessly into the overall narrative, serving dual purposes. When Ron Perlman in a week dumps all the info at the end, it does nothing but confuse and bore us with backstory that, while necessary for the context of the final fight, is done at the expense of everything else. By letting Mr. Monster Hunter learn English, or better yet, by letting the heroine learn a native language, we can exposit as much as we need to, using the fun interaction between the two to develop their characters simultaneously. The script hasn't shied away from montages yet, so why not just splice into the traveling montage some clips of her learning? That way, you can thread the exposition that Perlman in a week had to rush out at the end of the movie earlier on. Here are the most important things the audience needs to know at this point. The big tower is where she can return home. It's guarded by a giant, even more dangerous beast which has only one weakness. Mr. Monster Hunter wants to go there to kill the beast and close the portal. Anything more than that is unnecessary. We can guess why the tower is there, who built it, why Mr. Monster Hunter wants to close the portal. It doesn't matter. In fact, letting the audience connect those dots themselves is a lot more satisfying than whatever trite nonsense the script actually came up with. Now, things can progress the same way. We can remove the whole Ron in a wig exposition scene now. Which brings us to the climax and the last change. Following the original script, she works out a deal with Perlman, Smooks, and Mr. Monster Hunter. She helps them get to the portal, they'll help her get home. The Rathalos attacks, Mooks get wiped out, and here's where it makes some changes. Let's show the monster hunters getting wiped out. Facing certain death, they throw the heroine through the portal to save her life and return her home. She gets picked up by the military and is on her way home. Technically, she's gotten everything she's wanted. Her desire was to return home after all. But our newly matured heroine now has a revelation. She can't abandon her allies. In contrast with the callous way she threw away the lives of her soldiers, she now cares about what happens to Mr. Monster Hunter and co. Where the original script had the heroine passively follow the path of least resistance, simply watching as the military is attacked by the Rathalos, she chooses to return to the world of Monster Hunter to rescue her friends. Keeping the spirit of the changes going, I'd flip back to the perspective of Mr. Monster Hunter and Perlman Wigman making their last stand, ready to go out fighting, when a blast rips apart the Rathalos from the portal. It turns, enraged, only to come face to face with an M1 Abrams main battle tank. Screw immortal dragons with secret fatal flaws. I guarantee you what the audience wants to see is how impervious a Rathalos is to a depleted uranium, armor-piercing, fin-stabilized M829 tank round. We get a close-up of her face as she gives a cheesy one-liner from the inside of the tank before blasting the Rathalos into smithereens. By having the heroine make this choice at the climax of the script, you complete her arc, going from cruel leader to loyal friend. You give her the opportunity to grow through the script, and you solidify a thematic argument that goes beyond big monsters get blown up. It's the best we're going to do without throwing out the entire script. Being a script doctor is a thankless job. I mean, let's face it, these changes aren't ending up in the script. At best, they'll steal a few of your one-liners to throw in amongst the detritus, and you won't ever get credit for the scripts you do salvage. But at the end of the day, you're learning how to read, how to watch, how to listen to stories in a way that helps improve your own writing. You'll be able to look back at your writing with a more discerning eye, avoiding the mistakes that you've seen before. And isn't that worth it in the end? No. The answer is no. Well, what are you waiting for? You don't want to be stuck here, fixing other people's garbage scripts, do you? The only person who can write your ideas, your works, your soul is you. So get writing. The world is waiting. Thanks for watching. "聞かせて私だけに」